Hey there, everybody. Uh, I'm making this video to, I think, sum up my thoughts and probably explain better the confusion that arise from the project planning and everything else, as I think using a video and actually talking to you probably helps me put my thoughts in line in a much better way than in text, which might have caused some misunderstandings in the past. I've been reading your recent comments on the Discord server regarding the project timeline being confusing and different suggestions of how should we approach these, and also somehow a bit contradicting a conflicting view between things being too early but then actually being just in time because other people have to prioritize their life around things, which is of course natural. So I'm making this video to finally and hopefully clearing any doubts and see if everybody understood the way like if everybody understood the way I've set up the project or not. The intention is to, first and foremost, I would like to explain why have I set up the project the way I've done, and I would like to start with the fact that I'm no expert in project manager and I've never been a game producer before, of course, but we've worked at school on 2, 3 projects before, and also during my work life, I've covered different roles. Some of them required actually like timeline management and somehow like big picture overview skills to kind of get the work going and being on time with things. So I think I have a decent understanding of how these like big picture things impact eventually the, let's say, the more tangible parts of a project where you actually develop things or you're actually doing the work. And I know that some of you might think that these things are kind of redundant or unnecessary, or like, why are we even getting lost into this stuff? Let's just start making games already and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, all that's well and beautiful, I think. Like, it's nice to see everybody kind of like keen on starting already. But the previous experience on school and also at work, but especially in school, has taught me that uh, at some point you're gonna hit a lot of hiccups and obstacles, and just like things that have not been assessed prior to the project starting, like for example in a planning phase, that are eventually going to slow down the project, create confusion and misunderstandings in the team, waste everybody's time because we're trying to define basically some things that should have been defined earlier during the production, and that takes time away from the production. The whole purpose of this planning phase is to kind of set in stone the more like logistical things of the project. And now I don't know if you guys have read the slides carefully and given it enough time for each slide, try to take in what I'm trying to say and blah blah blah, or you just like kind of glance through it or like, oh yeah, well that's nice. So I'm not sure I can speak. Also, it could be that it was me that didn't like word properly the slides, or I had the concept in my mind, but I couldn't transfer it in text properly enough, so I'm not sure about that. But here we can see that uh, basically I've divided in three different instances, right? So planning, here in the project structure slide, you can actually see that the project will be divided in 3 main phases: planning, pre-production, production. The planning phase will establish the following, and these are kind of like the big main key points that came to my mind of why we need this phase and what are we actually trying to do during this phase. And then the slide next to this, the one that comes right after, explains what is the pre-production and how is that phase important and how it's basically going to lead us to the production eventually, right? And here there are mentioned a couple of reasons that I think are the biggest takeaways from here. And then of course there's a production. Now, the reason why I've set it up the way it is exactly like I said, to avoid misunderstandings later down the line and also to have already established all these like logistics. For example, like here I say meetings, we talked about meetings, and that already brought up some inconsistencies and some discussions last time, right? Imagine if that would have happened during production. Oh yeah, I can meet only this day. Oh, but this week I have this type of shifts. Oh, we have to meet, but I need to know like 3 4 weeks in advance. All these things are stuff that should already be taken care before starting and getting them out of the way as soon as possible. So we know that, okay, that's how we're going to proceed. For example, I know that whenever I plan to release a meeting or like ask for a live meeting or whatever, I know I should be aware of as my responsibility, you know, that, okay, I should try to warn you like 4 to 5 weeks in advance, right? Like that's my responsibility. I take care of it. Working guidelines and distribution. We talked about the 70-30 approach. So basically when we start the project, we already all know that we're going to have a main role and sub role. Of course, this thing is going to change dynamically as the project goes on, as the priorities shift around, but everybody knows that, okay, I have two jobs pretty much, and one job is more important than the other for the time being. So whenever I plan to like dedicate 10 to 20 hours a week, 4 to 7 hours a week, I should try to roughly spread it in a certain ratio, like 70 to 30. I'm not expecting you to like follow it by the second, of course, that's not realistic, but it kind of helps you, you, the member, to kind of know what your contribution should be. There shouldn't be any like kind of gray areas about what am I supposed to do and who's doing that and who's doing something else. So yeah, working guidelines, planning of pre-production phase. So this is where we talk more in depth about how we're going to structure pre-production. So like, how is the pitch gonna take place? Is it gonna be live or not live? If it's gonna be live, what time of voting system we're gonna use? I've explained that. What happens afterwards? After the pitching? Yeah, okay, we all pitch the game. Oh, great, we chose game number one, whatever. What happens afterwards? How we tackle the thing? Like, is it gonna start on Monday? Do we already prototype the same day? Do we do some paper prototypes? Like all these things need to be decided now, so that when we arrive there so when we arrive to the pitching, we're not just trying to figure things out as we go, but there's already like an established way of working. So it would save us time basically when we get to meet and do the thing. Saves everybody's time. All this preparation work might seem unnecessary now, but I think it's actually very important because also it teaches us to work in a kind of established pipeline in a way, right? We know that this is covered, this is not covered. We know how we proceed from here because all these like kind of dead moments slowly they add up in a project, especially given the fact that all of you have your own like personal schedules, of course, and people works, people have kids and looking for a job actively at the same time because yeah, you might, as you might as well know, life is not free. So because of that, that's why the preparation is so important. It might be a bit of a boring part of the project. I understand that. It can seem kind of pointless from a certain point of view, but I think this structure is what we've been lacking for the past projects, and I think it really showed eventually when we actually got to do a game, that there's no like coherent structure. And also rules should be rules. Nobody should be exempted from them. We cannot make exceptions. Everybody has to adhere to these rules. And if you're asking why, it's just because it's for the good of the project and the team dynamics, right? It's just the way it is. It is like that. Define and agree on project timelines. Also, I've given you a draft of the project timeline, but this was kind of an estimation that I kind of thought would be like the best compromise time-wise for like a good quality project, but also without kind of like uh, without squeezing people out. So without having you feel like, oh my God, there's so much to do in such a short time. What thing am I gonna tackle first? The priorities in this main role and sub role are shifting so fast because the project is advancing so fast. So I don't know, am I a bit left? I'm a bit behind. Some people already did so much work. I didn't have much time this week. I feel bad and blah blah blah. So I thought that 1 year would be a like reasonable time for you to like contribute like a decent amount to the project, learn as you kind of go, but also like give you a bit of breathing room in a way to like handle your other like life situations. So that's the main reason for the 1 month. Sorry, 1 year. And of course, you might say that, oh well, it would be best to like have these super short periods where we actually test how we work together and stuff, which I agree that's feasible and in a much smaller scope of game. But the 1 year timeline doesn't automatically include like increase the scale of the game. The scale of the game would still be like something very small. You just have more time to work on it, right? So we don't have to worry about things too much. Like, okay, if this week I can't do much, then we won't fit inside of the like 3 months period, right? So this scope of the game should still be small, but we have more breathing room, and also this allow us adults kind of like adjust our lives around it. And I don't know about you, maybe I'm very ambitious as a person. I think that that is clear, but I'm taking this also as a, I don't know, is this gonna work? I have no guarantee. If this gonna work, is this gonna fail? But also not doing nothing is not gonna give us nothing. So if we fail, there are things to be learned out of this, I think, for us, for our future careers, and also for us as people. Whenever we decide to like start something with other people, these are lessons that we're gonna learn. Nobody should get offended if things go wrong or fail or blah blah blah. It's a learning process. I think I think we try to get hold back by fear a bit too much. Like, oh God, I invest 1 year and this didn't really work out. Well, why it didn't work out, right? What are the things we can then trace back the steps we've taken, and what are the things, what were the obstacles, what were the things that hold us back during the project, what can we learn from these, and if in the future I work with somebody else that doesn't have to be us, like this group composition, anybody else, what are those valuable things that we can get away from these. And also, it's true that like I don't know how many thousands of indie games get released and they don't make it, and why would we be able to make a success and whatnot? Well, it's true. That's mathematics. The statistics don't lie, but also I don't want to let the statistics bind me or bind us. Like why we should not be able to do it. I don't see any reason why not. And besides, the main scope of the project is not to create this Valheim hit sort of game, but more about uh, setting up infrastructure for there may be perhaps if we don't get employed and we feel ambitious enough and we feel like we actually advanced a lot, we might set up our own game studio. And I think this is the way to approach it, like to actually have like pipelines, have organized work work in pipelines and rhythms and all that sort of stuff. And this is also great for portfolio material for everyone, I think, I would imagine. So anyways, going back to what I was trying to say, was that this timeline was kind of a draft, and I wanted to double check with you if things kind of like made sense for you. Does this seem reasonable, or does this seem like too short time still, or does this seem too long, right? And we've been having a bit of conflicting views, but eventually we agreed that 1 year it's okay, but we might have to shift around the length of certain phases, which also I agreed. I said, well, okay, if you don't want to spend too much time on the planning and you want to kind of like rush these things, we can do that. Like this week, we would be starting the second sprint where we set up the pitch and all that, and then we would pitch straight away the next week without like leaving that kind of gap time, right? I was super open to that, no problem at all. But yeah, the main reason is exactly these two phases would give us enough time to really set up the project and understand if there is any value into what we're building before we actually commit to like the most lengthiest part of the project, which is the productions of the 6.6 months. All of this is to kind of like uh, do the best we can and the most we can to guarantee the success of this phase, the production one, and also to see can we even enter this phase, because like nothing here is set in stone. Like if during pre-production, as we prototype, we realize that the game ideas fucking suck, or we just can't pull them off, or there's any other issues, then we might not even ever end this phase, and the project might stop here in the pre-production, and that's fine. I think that happens also with many game studios. They explore ideas and they find out that, hey, you know what? None of the 6, 7 ideas the designers presented to us are actually worth pursuing. So, well, that's it. But you didn't invest money and time into the rest of the project, right? This is kind of a safe gate. That's what we're doing here. Maybe I should have explained it better. Maybe I should have made this video earlier, of course. That's well, this is exactly another learning lesson from me. I hope I'll keep this in mind for the future. But yeah, so the whole purpose of these two phases is exactly that, kind of like guaranteeing a higher degree of safety when it comes to the production. Of course, this doesn't guarantee the success of the project, obviously, but I think it can do good to the project itself. Anyways, uh, so project structure, define and agree on project timelines, discuss possible business directions. This is also for some people kind of useless, but I think this shouldn't be taken as in, okay, we need to define our business direction. More like, if this happens to be like successful, what do you think? Like, how should we move on from there? What are some suggestions? It's kind of there in the air, but we've already touched upon that, so we kind of know where everybody stands on, and we don't have to sort of like guess eventually where to take this. Oh shit, where to take this after that? Estimation of costs. This was important actually because, and this should be done exactly in the planning, in my opinion at least, because like we talked about Miro, we talked about there's Taiga. Taiga also has some like premium version of Taiga that allow you to do more stuff. Like all this stuff, I want to say, is everybody actually willing to invest into this? How much are they willing to invest, if at all? And are there like any free alternatives, right? Like for example, someone suggested that Excalibur, which by the way I have to still have a look at it. Thanks a lot for that. Uh, Set up onboarding plan for future team members. These might be the most, let's say, useless part, because we don't even know we're gonna need future team members or not. But I thought that it would be nice to at least this. I think this most concerning me, not you guys. But it would be nice to have a good onboarding in the way that people don't feel lost. Like you don't just give them links to documentation and they just have to read documentations and then they just start working, but you actually take them step by step through everything we've done so far, how we've set up the project, and kind of establish that more like a friendly feeling and yeah, a bit more like a positive outgoing feeling and vibes. Anyways, marketing actions. This might be stupid to some of us, but if we are to kind of get a bit noticed, especially nowadays, it's so hard to find a job and stuff. We actually have to seriously think about this stuff. It's not it's not redundant at all. I think we're not trying to say sell AAA games, so we don't need to have this whole marketing sort of campaign of sorts, but kind of start thinking about what channels to publish our progress and in development. Like, is it Reddit? Is the indie game in Reddit? Is it LinkedIn? Is it YouTube? I think these kind of things help. First of all, gain traction behind the project if the project has enough potential to eventually kind of like make money for us. But if not, then it's good material for portfolio. It shows us how we work in a team, what everyone has done, how we've tackled problems, and like it just kind of shows that we have some ownership in things and we can kind of structure our work professionally in a way, right? So there's multiple benefits, I think, to thinking of this section, in my opinion at least. Set up communication channels with the audience and the public. Yeah, this is kind of somehow tied to the marketing action. This is also very important, in my opinion. But these are all of the points, the main takeaway that we will establish during the project planning, and they wouldn't have taken us that long, but I put 1 month and 24 days because I wasn't totally sure of your life schedule. So I didn't know like how much time you would have starting from, for example, January, the end of January, right? So I thought that, okay, worst case scenario, I think 1 month and 24 days would be enough for you to kind of arrange your life and kind of like find the time to basically establish these things with me. But like we found out, it seems like people actually is eager and they have more time than I expected, so we can, like get this planning phase much shorter. Then we've got the pre-production. Maybe that's where the confusion arises. Erika said that she seems to be confused. The pre-production, it's kind of the testing the waters sort of phase. So what it does, of course, game pitch and concepts, and then fast prototyping. Some game ideas and mechanics can have some sort of like paper prototype, like kind of board game style, which don't require any sort of technical engine or programming skills. Anybody can do a paper prototype, pretty much. Uh, Plus, of course, if we have a coder, and then we can also kind of prototype in the engine. So this is where we're basically testing out the ideas and seeing if it's worth pursuing. Also see how we work together, right? Like how does the work distribution actually work out here? How what are the vibes within the group? How professional does people behave? Uh, Basically, from here we can assess if it's worth continuing into the production, pretty much, and kind of keep investing our time and effort into this, or just saying like, hey, you know what? We tried our best. We came out with some cool prototypes, but yeah, it's not gonna cut it. No offense taken. Project gets shut down, and we all have learned hopefully something from this. Uh, of course, in this phase, programmers and designers would most probably have more work to do compared to maybe other departments. Although I don't think that's necessarily always true, because uh, I think art direction is something that can already be established for all the projects, kind of like a possible art direction, reference, games, mood boards, color schemes, UI examples, character examples, if there's any character in the game. Like all this sort of stuff can be done, are very theoretical. They're much less hands-on, texturing substance and blah blah blah, but they're still very important, and they make the life easier for the artists during production, right? Again, we try to take care of as much as possible of this high-level stuff and kind of more abstract things, so that eventually when we get to production, if we get there, then there shouldn't be kind of like too many incoherencies, and people kind of know where to go from there. Establish software suite. I think that's kind of important. So what engine, what 3D modeling program, doesn't even matter. FBX, OBJ, blah blah blah, whatever you want, right? If you're using Houdini, for example, if there is need to use Houdini, how are we gonna handle that? A license, blah blah blah, here and there. That sort of stuff, it's actually important. You don't want to be doing that in production. Establish version control software. Another important aspect is a GitHub is going to be something else. If it's GitHub, are we going to have different repositories? So something similar to what Please Be Patient did, or like how all this sort of how that stuff is going to be handled. Setting production priorities for MVP, minimum viable products. So of course, let's say we have 3 ideas, and they can all be developed to like their full glory, scale, and extent. But how do we cut down things so that we maintain the core of the game and we deliver the MVP, so the minimum viable product, without like having to invest 3 years of work, right? Because every game idea is going to have a probably different scale, and uh, all game ideas are going to have a different MVP, right? So how much you can downsize the thing so that afterwards, if there's a chance, you can then again start to implement those things that got cut out. So the MVP, this needs to be recognized during pre-production for each idea and set like core goals for each prototype, right? This prototype needs to execute this, needs to achieve this, and this. The other prototype needs to achieve this, and that. All these sort of things are kind of important. Like they save everybody time down the line, everybody's time down the line. Uh, Setting out the production phase. So If we see that there's a good chance, like, okay, I think we're actually gonna get longer with these, we can actually start the production phase, how we're gonna set it up, and all the logistics of that. Discussing modular and procedural tools, like is there even need for something like Houdini, which is great, but like setting up tools can be quite time consuming, especially if you're not like super confident with it. So is there need for that, or is it kind of overkill for certain projects? Gathering references, code art mechanics, like I said, this is where the game design really needs to do a lot of work, like documentation, examples, illustrations, maybe even the designer could prototype some things on their own to kind of show what they kind of aiming for, blah blah blah. Discussing scope of the project, come up with plan B or C. Like we said that we're gonna have different game ideas. It would be silly. I did not mean that we're gonna find one game idea and bring it to production. That was not my intention, and I don't really know how people got that from the slides, but perhaps it was poor choice of text from my point of view. I don't know. But I think after all these experiences, I've learned that yeah, that's not gonna work. So that's why we're gonna have at least three game ideas we kind of prototype, with one being the one we regard with the highest potential, right? So we're gonna start prototyping that. Of course, it would be nice to prototype, prototype them all at the same time, but also we don't have like a squad of coders, team of coders who can kind of we can delegate each and every one to the different prototypes. We can try with three coders perhaps. We can try to mimic something like that. But that was the idea, basically, to have at least three game ideas and maybe even more if in kind of in our back pockets. Get close play tests if possible to try out the game idea. So basically, as soon as we get the prototypes, we should all be trying them out. We should get people that we know to try them out. Maybe even ask school students to try them out, and or people like, for example, if the game is a 4X. I'm just making an example. 4X games are very complex. We're not gonna make a 4X game, but maybe go to the Reddit for 4X games and see, hey, we're kind of working on a prototype here. Is anybody interested in trying this out for, and then leaving some feedback, and and kind of discussing, and then basically we're testing the grounds and seeing is there actually potential before we move on into production, blah blah blah. Plan UI UX are super important in games, and I think they should already kind of be planned and be start to thought about in this already in the pre-production stage. And then basically that's about it. Like as you can see, this is already kind of like, this is somehow already production, but more abstract, more like high level. It includes a lot of still like kind of high level things we need to take care of. While the production phase, if we ever get there, it's more about, okay, the majority of these high level things have been established, and now it's only about, we know where we're going with the prototype, we know it has potential, we already received some feedback, and we kind of establish a roadmap where we want to be from now to the end of the year to achieve the MVP. And that then it just starts like boom, boom, boom. Then it starts more like kind of a, let's say like a, how it sounds bad to say that, but sort of a factory work. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Uh, this is the reason behind me dividing the project the way I've done it, even though it might seem unreasonable to some of you or like kind of useless. I think it's not useless, but hey, if you think that's the case, maybe that's the case. I don't know. One thing is for sure, if I ever work on my projects, I'm gonna make sure that I structure something similar to this, or I actually might just borrow this structure for myself and use all